So I'm very, very aware that we are standing in the way of your lunch. So I'm going to save you all the formalities of introductions. But we're actually going to do a bit of a deeper dive following on from James's interview. Not that we planned that, but that's a nice follow-on. So we're going to touch on items like brand partnerships, 5G, new hardware launches that are having a significant impact on mobile esports, and how they're sort of shifting the dynamic for the industry at the moment. So I'd like to introduce you to Taewon, the the General Manager of Global Publishing for Super Evil, and David Lee, the VP of Operations for ESP Gaming. Perhaps, guys, you could share a quick overview on your background, your experience, and also how you feel the industry has evolved over the last few years.
Hey, I'm Taewon Yoon from Super Evil Megaco. Before I studied with Super Evil, I have roughly 20 plus years of experience in gaming. Actually, one of my first extrovert game conference was actually the one of the first ECTS in London, back in 1997-ish. That was just before I released this small game called StarCraft in Korea. So that game somehow grew into a TV entertainment in Korea, around year 2000-ish. And then since then, I worked on World of Warcraft, StarCraft 2, Diablo 3, and moved on to Wargaming and worked on the World of Tank. So kind of lived through this entire esports cycle. And then and Super Evil, a little bit different here is that, now I'm kind of trying to make esports as a industry with its own P&L, and I believe that it will be something similar to traditional sports, NFL, or be it NFL or FIFA. So one thing I'd like to point out here is that the previous lecture on mobile esports was great, but one thing we'll talk about today here will be specifically esports that wants to become a real industry, not the event type of stuff that you tend to see quite often. Right? Quite short, right?
Yeah, that was good. David, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I'm David Lee. My background is that I don't want to say I was a professional gamer, because back then it was not the same as it is today, but I played at a very high level. Back in the day, I played Warcraft 3 at a very high level, and then I eventually became an attorney. And while I was practicing, I became a team owner, and I started my own production company. And then I worked for a small company by the name of ESL, which you saw James Dean to give a presentation. I worked in the American division, and then now I currently oversee esports production for ESP Gaming.
Thank you.
I've been fortunate, along with Taewon, I've been a part of esports in some way or another, whether it's competing or writing about it or producing events, since I was maybe 14 or 15, since StarCraft Brood War as well. So I've been very fortunate enough to experience and chronicle the entire experience.
So I think we're all big advocates of mobile esports. We have seen significant shifts in terms of sort of the player base and the needs of players as well. Can you explain a little bit of, I suppose, how the audience has matured and grown over the last few years?
Well, the first time I started to talk about mobile esports 3 years ago in some of the conferences in Asia, and I always had to start my lecture on, you guys will probably feel that I'm crazy because I'm talking about esports on mobile, and that mobile is a genre. It's it was when everyone was thinking that the mobile on mobile is impossible. Mobile esports is no one believed what I was talking about. And then as time goes by, I kind of like came back to that like one conference in Asia over and over again. It's like this year, this is how we developed. So every year, like with us, we've been kind of increasing our fan base and also the audience roughly 2-3 times per year. So I'm really glad to see that now not only esports itself, but also mobile esports is becoming a part of the getting a lot of attention. Sometimes I even feel like we started to go into the sort of bubble stage in esports as a overall industry.
So, and you touched on the bubble at the moment. For mobile esports, we're seeing, I suppose, more endemic brands pick up sponsorship opportunities. So the likes of 3 or Razer or the like. Do you think we are at risk? Do you think there's going to be a shift in terms of the sponsors and brands that are going to become associated with mobile esports? Is it too early? Do you think bigger brands are going to start to get involved now that the audience is growing? David, maybe you want to touch on that.
Yeah, I think as the audience grows, and right now, mobile esports is still like the ugly stepchild. People don't respect it. They don't give the same respect. But people don't realize that a lot of the mobile titles are outperforming a lot of the PC and console titles in terms of viewership. Already, if you have a major mobile esports title, it's going to be top 3, top 4 on Twitch over all other PC or console games. So what PC and console have done effectively was blaze a trail for mobile esports, where mobile could take from the learnings, both the good and the bad, and then kind of tailor and tweak the strategy in pressing forward. So I think if you look at the big brands, a lot of the big brands already they have their foot halfway in, and within the next year or two, I guarantee there's going to be some big non-endemic sponsorships because we're working directly with those guys and we're talking with those guys. So yeah, I think it's very much on the horizon. The same way you saw in PC sports, a lot of non-endemic sponsors flood in the past 2 or 3 years. A lot of those similar partnerships are going to be forged in mobile very soon.
Do you have any?
Well, in our case, the World Championship we did last month in Singapore was sort of the step change for us in terms of sponsorship, because that was the first time we had actually had a title sponsor for our esports World Championship in the form of Razer, but that was endemic. But we also had 2 incredible feat where Coca-Cola has become our sponsor for World Championship as well. On top of that, what was really interesting to me was that we actually studied a network of partnership throughout the world in the form of cinema chains that are doing a viewing event on their own. That's how we get to work with Coca-Cola. And so with that, I think that this year, I think that we will be starting to see that a lot more non-endemic brands, working with mobile esports, and that is actually one of my goals for the year as well, having real sponsorship from the non-endemic brand, not only from endemic brands such as the device makers or telecoms, whatnot.
But just touching on that, is it still too early for non-endemic brands to get involved? Is there that sort of risk of, for mainstream brands, if they already have an assumption of how traditional esports are run and the growth and the size of, your League of Legends, your Hearthstone, is it still too early? In terms of the time frame, what are we looking at here? Because obviously Razer is probably is sort of leading the way in many ways in terms of hardware. The audience is kind of spot on and perfect. So how would a mainstream brand get involved? Would they bother now?
So one thing I'd like to point out is that I find it actually really amusing to have a term traditional esports, because I don't find anything traditional in overall esports. Mobile or not, from the way I see it is that every esports is still in it is a infancy or growing stage. No one has actually really figured out what exactly profitable esports ecosystem works, and then I think that it's really important to build a ecosystem that everyone who is involved in the ecosystem be profitable, and that is until that is done, I don't think we have a traditional esports at all. So and in terms of the sponsorship itself, one thing I do think need really focus on is actually how we can return the value to the sponsors and brands. So I see in these sort of conferences people talk about the how we can approach or attract to the brand, but I rarely see people talk about how we give value to those brands, right? So it never is late, right? Or it never is too early, as long as the value we deliver to the our sponsors and brands, and then the amount of sponsorship we are asking for them justify their ROI. It is really important to me that figuring out that magic formula between what we do and then what kind of value we deliver to them matches what you're asking. And that is why I'm talking about this bubble in esports overall, because I have a little bit of scare that a lot of valuations and monies talked about in esports is a little bit too exaggerated nowadays. So that's why I see things.
Cool. The growth of the number of titles that we're seeing, offering up more core experiences that essentially sort of blur the line between, again, traditional esports, but PC and console gamers. Do you think that is more down to the audience and mobile gamers wanting those kind of experiences, or is that actually based off of the launches that we're seeing with the Razer phone, Project Linda, that sort of blur those lines?
Blur the lines of what?
Blur the lines between sort of mobile, but offering core experiences, so you're sort of blurring the lines between what PC and mobile actually is.
I think especially for mobile, you constantly see new games that completely revolutionize the industry, right? So it's the iteration over and over again of making slight tweaks, and then somebody comes up with something crazy like a Clash Royale monetization, right? Or recently we saw Lineage 2, Netmarble's Lineage 2, come up with a very interesting monetization scheme where you're constantly having a carrot at the end of the stick and making people spend more, right? So then you have a game like Vainglory, which gives a core gaming experience that does not take away it does not give you a watered down experience, right? So that's another level of revolutionizing the industry. So whenever you have a game that's released that really changes the industry, then that's gonna add to the esports cycle, and that's gonna add on, and then people learn from that and grow and grow and grow and grow. So when you see mobile and PC and how now they're almost interchangeable, I think you're gonna see as mobile gets closer and closer to PC and eventually overtake PC in terms of graphics, which I think we're very close to getting. I think they're going to learn from each other, and then mobile will eventually surpass because there is no barrier of entry for mobile esports.
Well, for me, I don't really see the difference between the mobile esports or traditional esports, because what it really do is that it is a you are playing a game competitively, and then the core experience of esports is watching how those games are played by other than yourself, right? So mobile or not, PC, console, it is a different sort of form factor, and as an esport, I think everything is the same, but I do think that mobile has an inherent advantage over PC or console. But the fact that it is it's not really easy to bring around your PC or console. So one of the key part of esports, like for me, is that like the experience of playing with your friends and compete with your friends, whatnot, and like mobile, like games, inherently, everyone has a mobile in your pocket, and then developing that, like familiarity to the game is so much easier in mobile than PC or console. So you kind of like, when you play, football, now see it, if you look at the traditional sports, then the way you get to get into sport is that you play as a child playing football in the alley with a friend, and then if you're good, you become professional players or national players. If you're not, you sit, on your couch and watch the TV with your beer in your hand. So that's why I think that mobile is a perfect medium to deliver that experience. And then the project we were doing with Razer and what else? So the Samsung decks and whatnot. So we've been slightly experimenting with the shifting Vanguard experience from mobile only to also mouse and keyboard as a user interface as well. And then I think that potentially in the future that this mobile and desktop or TV experience will move into one thing. You may have a little bit different UI and different location you play Vanguard. Right now it's a mobile game, but in the future maybe you play on your TV as well. So shaping out that could be a really interesting thing to think about in the future, I believe.
And how do you think that would change the, I suppose, the gameplay element, the strategic side of things, with people competing, or even people sort of just experiencing a core game on their phone versus something with a mouse and keyboard? How is that going to evolve the competitive nature of things like Vainglory or Arena of Valor or any of those titles?
That is actually a really good question and hard to answer right now, because obviously when you have a touch as a your basic UI, and when you have physical joypad or joystick or mouse and keyboard, are they all equally same in terms of competitiveness? I don't have an answer to that. Then right now, we've been basically confining our competitive scene in esports. We only allow people to do touch interface as a esports scene, but it is something that we'll have to think about as we develop, Vanguard develop as a game, as a and also as a esports. What is still really interesting is that the core mission of Vanguard esports is being mobile or PC or console is not really important. We want to be as competitive as possible. We don't want to deliver a dumbed down, a casual experience to our players. It is if you do that, I think that it's not going to be esports anymore. To me, it'll become a just marketing tactic. From
an operations point of view, I don't suppose. Do you have anything you want to add, David?
Yeah, I think it's only time will tell, right? So I think every platform makes each other better because everybody learns from each other. So right now with Project Linda, for example, we don't know. It's a new venture. So only time will tell whether it works or not.
We'll touch on this again next year. It's fine. Aware of timing. So I suppose just one final question from me then. You touched on sort of how the mobile scene could potentially overtake PC console because of the experiences that you're all offering. How, I suppose, in terms of timings, what are you envisioning for that? How far into the future do you think that will take place? And also, what are the most exciting elements launching or happening at the moment, 5G, for example, that you think will help kind of magnify that shift?
So sound like there are two questions, right? If I touch upon 5G first. It is actually really interesting development for us because most of our event and esports has been done on Wi-Fi. And there is a reason why, because the current 4G or LTE technology has a inherent latency, which is like when you play it, it is stable, but it give a like 50 to 80 millisecond latency. And then for a game like Vanguard, which has a which requires really fast response, like the same or better than like PC mobile. So basically, 4G is not enough for having a competitive gaming. So the promise of 5G of like 10 millisecond or less latency is actually like God-given gift to us, because like once 5G becomes a like norm, then we will probably be able to run our competitive gaming and esports event over 5G. And also the another aspect of like 5G is that it allows many more people to use the network at the same time, which, if you think about it, is exactly the problem we are having in current event. Because like when we have an esports event, we have to ask people to don't play Vanguard right now over Wi-Fi because it clog up all the bandwidth. And then 4G cannot solve the problem, but 5G hopefully will. So. What was another question?
It was more sort of blue sky thinking. Do you think the elements like 5G will sort of help magnify the shift towards mobile gaming or mobile
I
sports?
think I kind of answered that already, right?
Yeah.
It will, and then how soon? Well, it depends how good I do my job.
And David, you've been unusually quiet for the panel, so.
No, so I think in terms of like growth and becoming the leader of the esports scene, it's just more about the number of titles, right? Because if you look at the number of core esports titles on mobile, it's the casual titles completely dwarf it, right? And if you look at each genre, from FPS to MOBA to RPG to to whatnot, like there are only a very small handful of competitive titles currently on mobile. So as more developers focus on the competitive experience, as technology continues to expand and press forward and give opportunities for a core gaming experience on the mobile platform, I think that's going to really drive it. That's one element. And from the spectator standpoint, which is half of what the esports experience is about, I think it's just a matter of time, right? If you look at the PC audience, it wasn't until the kids growing up playing StarCraft, playing the very early PC games, until they got older to the point where they were watching the games that they used to play. It happened with League of Legends. League of Legends is in their 8th or 9th year now, and when those kids went from teenagers to professionals, and they no longer had the time to play, and they're still watching the game because they were into the competitive experience. That maturation process was just you can't speed that up. And so if you look at a game, a platform like mobile, you had the first really core esports experience about 4.5 years ago, and those kids were 13-year-olds to 15-year-olds, and once they said, hey, mobile is my platform. I'm going to play, my core gaming experience is going to be played on mobile, and then they get older and they usher in the new generation of gamers, and they accept that watching esports on their mobile device right after they play their game on their mobile device is the most seamless and frictionless experience that they have. That's going to be the most important driving factor for increasing spectators' viewership on mobile.